My name is Ethan Miller. I'm 28 years old. And last summer, my own parents sued me for stealing their retirement fund. Only, there was no fund. Just a story they told so many times. They started to believe it themselves. The truth, it was my college scholarship, a full ride I earned, and they tried to take it from me 10 years after the fact. If you've ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you, stick around, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I want to know how far this story reaches. Because you're not going to believe how it ends. It started on a Tuesday. I remember because we had just pushed a major update at the tech company I work for in Seattle, and the office was buzzing. You know that kind of tired joy people get after a huge deadline? That was the air. Laughter over burnt coffee, high fives over keyboards. For once, I left the office before sunset. Driving home, I felt complete, like I'd crossed some invisible finish line. That morning, I had submitted the last mortgage payment for my apartment. Nothing fancy, just a one-bedroom in Capitol Hill. But it was mine, paid off, no roommates, no landlords, no co-signers, just me and 4 walls I built with every skipped vacation, every instant ramen dinner, every sleepless night debugging lines of code. When I walked through the door, the paint still smelled new, the windows shimmered with summer light. I dropped my keys into a ceramic bowl I'd bought from a street market in Fremont, hand-thrown, uneven, a soft swirl of blue and gray. That bowl sat by my door for 5 years, waiting for this moment. I stared at it like it was a trophy. I was too tired to cook, so I ordered a pepperoni pizza and cracked open a beer, sat cross-legged on the floor, scrolling through Reddit, letting the hum of the city filter through the windows. My first real night of peace in, I don't know, maybe a decade. Then the intercom buzzed. The mail carrier, certified delivery. I figured it was just the deed papers from the county, something bureaucratic. One more checkbox. I went down barefoot, signed the pad, and took the thick envelope upstairs. It was cream-colored, heavy, embossed with the name Dalton and Reese LLP. I'd never heard of them. Back in my apartment, I opened it. A letter slid out crisp, precise, sterile, and at the top, on behalf of our clients, Richard and Helen Miller. I stopped breathing. Richard and Helen are my parents. Why would they contact me through a law firm? I read further, my eyes catching phrases that didn't belong in any family sentence: breach of verbal contract, unjust enrichment, immediate repayment of parent plus student loans totaling 154 or 212s. I blinked, read again. My hands started to tremble. The pizza in my stomach turned to stone. They were demanding repayment for money they claimed to have borrowed on my behalf, loans they said they took out for my education. But I hadn't needed loans. I had received a full scholarship, full tuition, room and board, books, everything. The Gates Millennium Scholars Program covered it all. I had the acceptance letter framed once. And now they were trying to pretend it never happened. I sank to the floor. The edges of the paper cut into my fingertips. My vision blurred, and all I could hear was my own breath, sharp and ragged. They were threatening to take everything, my apartment, my savings, my salary. There it was, in black ink. Failure to comply within 30 days will result in asset seizure, wage garnishment, and property lien. 30 days. I stared at the letter like it had teeth, like it was alive. And maybe it was. Because that letter wasn't just about money, it was a declaration of war from my own parents. The people who had promised to help me through college, the people who sat me down at 18 and told me that the full scholarship I thought I'd won wasn't enough, that we couldn't afford the rest, that I had to give up MIT and stay home to attend a cheaper state school. The people who said, "We're a team," while secretly investing every dollar they had into my older brother David's elite education across the country. Yeah, that's what I said, my older brother. David, the golden child. I was the backup plan, the runner-up, the one who made it out, but only because I clawed my way, inch by inch, while they handed David a silver spoon and called it sacrifice. And now they were trying to rewrite the past, to say they had paid for my future. Let me tell you something. I don't have many luxuries. I don't own a car. I still make my own coffee, even though there's a blue bottle 2 blocks away. But what I do have is my memory, my receipts, my damn pride. And I had no intention of letting anyone, especially the people who tried to kill my dreams before they could grow, take away what I built. Not without a fight. But I'll admit something. That night, sitting there on the floor with the letter clutched in my fist, I almost gave in. I almost believed them. Because when your own family gaslights you, it's not just confusing, it's soul-breaking. And they knew that. They were counting on it. What they didn't count on was this one tiny thing. A forgotten corner of the internet. A single post, buried deep, written by an 18-year-old version of me. It had only a few likes, a few notes, but it held everything. And the moment I found it was the moment everything changed. I didn't sleep that night. The letter sat on my kitchen table like a silent threat, its edges curling slightly from my sweaty hands. I walked circles around my apartment, floor creaking under every step, the city outside humming with oblivious peace. Somewhere out there, people were clinking glasses, watching Netflix, folding laundry, normal lives. I had just made my final mortgage payment that morning, 10 years of grit and hustle, and by sundown, my own parents had declared financial war. By dawn, the silence wasn't peace anymore, it was pressure. I stood in front of the mirror, looking like someone who had aged overnight, unshaven, eyes raw. I took a deep breath, picked up the letter again, and read it one more time. It didn't feel real, but the law firm was real. The language was real. The number $154,212 was terrifyingly real. And the betrayal. That was the sharpest part. To understand how much that letter shattered me, you have to understand the lie I lived in for years, the one I didn't even know was a lie. I was 18 when I got the acceptance letter from MIT. It came in a thick envelope, which, as any college hopeful will tell you, is the good kind. I remember standing in our cracked driveway in Tacoma, Washington, holding it like it was a golden ticket. My hands were shaking. I ripped it open. First word, congratulations. I ran inside, yelling, "Mom, Dad, I got in. I got into MIT. My mother, Helen, was arranging fake tulips in a vase. She barely looked up. "Oh, honey, that's wonderful," she said, like I'd just told her I got an A on a math quiz. My father, Richard, didn't even stand. He was at the kitchen table, sorting utility bills. He pinched the bridge of his nose, a gesture I now recognize as calculating mode. "Well, son," he said flatly, "that's a hell of an accomplishment, but we need to be realistic." That was the beginning. We sat at that kitchen table for hours, him with his legal pad and calculator, me with my heart sinking in real time. "We're proud," they said, "but let's break down the numbers." He added tuition even though MIT scholarship covered it, then room and board, then books, then travel, insurance, laptop costs, food. He inflated everything, line by line, until the gap was massive. "It's just not doable," he concluded. "Our credit's not good enough to co-sign, and we don't want you buried in debt. That's not love." My mother nodded solemnly, placing her hand over mine like this was some sort of group funeral. "You're still going to be an engineer," she said. "Just not there. UW is a great school. You'll live at home. It'll be practical." And I believed them. I didn't even ask questions. I didn't even push back. I was 18, they were my parents. Why would they lie? So I enrolled at the University of Washington. I commuted from my childhood bedroom, took the bus to class, took the late shift at a diner in the U District. The smell of stale fries soaked into my jackets. On weekends, I worked in a warehouse near SeaTac, unloading boxes heavier than my body should have managed. Meanwhile, my brother David. David got into Duke. Private university, East Coast, full bells and whistles. My parents were ecstatic. "We're investing in David's future," my dad said proudly at a family dinner. "We might have to delay retirement," Mom added, "like martyrs, but he deserves it." I remember looking across the table at David. He wasn't even making eye contact, just twirling his fork, cheeks a little red. He knew. He knew it wasn't fair, but he said nothing. And in that silence, I swallowed the resentment and kept working. Fast forward 10 years. I built my life brick by brick, graduated top of my class, landed a junior developer role at a small tech firm, Clawed my way into a senior engineer title. I had zero debt, zero trust fund, but I made it. Every paycheck, I saved. Every bonus, I invested. The condo wasn't just a home, it was a monument, my declaration of independence. So when that letter came, when they claimed I owed them, it wasn't just wrong. It was an attack on my entire identity. But here's where things started to shift. The next day at work, I was physically present but mentally in a different dimension. I barely touched my code. Slack messages blurred past me. At lunch, I sat across from Marcus, my lead engineer and the closest thing I had to a friend at the office. He noticed. "Hey," he said, peeling open a protein bar, "you okay? You look like you just watched your house catch fire." I smiled weakly, close. I hesitated. Then I told him, not everything, but enough. He whistled low. "They're suing you. Your parents." "Yeah." He blinked. "For what they think you owe them." "They said they paid my tuition." I said bitterly, "But I had a scholarship, full ride." "You still have proof." I paused. That's when the first spark lit. "There used to be a post." I said slowly, "I think I wrote something on Tumblr back in 2015. I thanked the Gates Foundation. It was a huge deal. First kid in the neighborhood to win it." "You should find that," Marcus said. "If it's still out there, could be gold." Gold. That word stayed with me. That night, I went home and opened my laptop like it was a time machine, logged into an email I hadn't used in years, reset the password, found the linked Tumblr account somehow, miraculously. It still existed. And there it was. A post from June 1st, 2015, the title "We Did It, Grandma." I clicked. "Today I got confirmation I've been selected for the Gates Millennium Scholarship. Full ride. All 4 years. MIT. Here I come. They say hard work pays off. This one's for you. Grandma, I know you're watching." My throat closed up. I remembered writing that in the middle of the night. After crying in the living room, my grandma had passed the year before, and she was the only one in the family who ever said, "You're meant for more." The post had 3 notes, a heart emoji, a random reblog, and one comment from someone named Shell K92. "Proud of you. Ethan, don't let anyone take this from you." I stared at the screen, heart pounding. They couldn't take it from me. Not this time. But what I didn't know, what no one knew yet, was that this forgotten blog post, this grainy piece of digital memory, would unravel their entire plan. I printed the Tumblr post in full color. Date, time, URL, everything visible. I even saved a PDF version with metadata intact for extra measure. I ran it through the Wayback Machine. The internet never forgets. And thank God for that. But a blog post wasn't going to stop a lawsuit. I needed help. Real help. So the next morning, I did what any rational adult would do when their parents are trying to destroy them. I Googled Seattle civil litigation attorneys. It was terrifying. Law firms with gold-trimmed websites, phrases like retainer required and preliminary consultation starts at $500 hour. I scrolled until my vision blurred. That's when I found her. Julia Hahn. Escau, her bio wasn't flashy. No gavel photos, no marble columns, just a headshot of a Korean-American woman in her early 30s, smiling like she actually enjoyed this line of work. Under her name, it said first-gen college grad, Gates Millennium Scholar, fighting for the ones who earned it. I stared at the screen. I booked a consultation within 5 minutes. Her office was small, not the towering downtown glass kind, but a converted craftsman house in Beacon Hill. The waiting room had potted succulents and a poster that read, "Justice is expensive. Injustice is unaffordable." Julia shook my hand firmly. Her grip was dry and steady. "You must be Ethan," she said, already scanning the folder I'd brought. "I hear this kind of thing more than I'd like," she added. I sat down across from her and tried to keep it together. "I just want to prove that I'm not a liar," I said, "that I didn't take anything from them." She looked up. "You mean besides your dignity?" That made me laugh, sharp and involuntary. She flipped through the papers. "This post is gold. We'll timestamp it, cross-verify with scholarship records, and request MIT to submit a non-attendance letter confirming you were offered admission and declined. That plus the Gates Foundation confirmation." She tapped the stack like a hammer. "Your parents don't have a case. I nodded slowly, but they already filed. I said, they've got lawyers. They listed loan numbers, names. It all looks official. Julia gave a dry smile. Official doesn't mean truthful. That's where we come in. Over the next few days, Julia and I built a legal fortress. I forwarded every email I'd ever received from the Gates Foundation, pulled tax transcripts showing zero educational payments from my parents. I requested transcripts from the University of Washington proving full scholarship status. We even got a notarized letter from my old high school guidance counselor, Mrs. Dorsey, who still remembered my scholarship ceremony. Meanwhile, my parents didn't reach out. Not a call, not a text, just silence. Like they'd let their lawyer do the talking for them. Until one morning, I received a voicemail from an unknown number. The message was short. Ethan, it's Dad. I don't know what story you're spinning, but this isn't about hurting you. It's about fairness. We sacrificed for you. Don't make us look like villains. Villains. I played it 3 times. Fairness, that word, it echoed in my head all day. Was it fair when they pressured me to give up MIT? Was it fair when they used my scholarship as leverage to keep me living under their roof? Was it fair when David got Ivy League, private dorms, internships at Morgan Stanley, and I was working night shifts to cover textbooks? They didn't want fairness. They wanted control. The first hearing was a preliminary conference. No jury, just a judge in a modest King County courtroom. The walls were beige, the chairs, metal and cold. I wore a navy blazer I hadn't used since my last promotion. Julia looked like a calm assassin in a charcoal suit. Then they walked in. My parents. My mother had on pearls. My father held a leather binder like he was presenting a Q4 earnings report, and behind them David. He looked older than I remembered. Same smug jawline, but with expensive glasses and a tailored coat. He wouldn't meet my eyes. The judge entered. The session began. Their lawyer spoke first, a man in his 50s with perfect hair and zero soul. He painted a picture of noble parents burdened with debt, betrayed by their ungrateful son who refused to honor a verbal agreement. Julia stood next, her voice smooth as silk but sharp as broken glass. Your Honor, we will provide written proof that the defendant received a full scholarship covering all educational expenses. No funds were ever transferred by the plaintiffs. In fact, she held up a printout. He documented it publicly in 2015 in real time. The judge raised an eyebrow. A blog? Julia nodded. Verified via archive and metadata. Additionally, we have statements from former educators and tax records confirming no payments were ever made by the plaintiffs. My father's face didn't move. My mother twisted her pearls. Then came the moment I didn't expect. David was called to testify. Their lawyer asked him, to your knowledge, did your brother ever express that he would repay your parents for college expenses? David hesitated. I think he said something once about paying them back, but that was before he got the scholarship. Julia stood immediately. Did he ever receive any money from them? David swallowed hard. No. And were you aware, she continued, that Ethan was awarded the Gates Millennium Scholarship? David nodded. Yeah, he told us. We all knew. A pause, a silence thick enough to choke. So you knew, Julia said, voice low, and still supported your parents in filing this suit. David's jaw clenched. I didn't think it would go this far. The courtroom was quiet. The judge glanced at me, then at the lawyer. We'll reconvene next week for a formal review of documentation. Until then, both parties are expected to refrain from communication. I walked out without looking back. My hands were shaking again, but not from fear. From something sharper, something cold and steady. Righteousness. They had tried to rewrite the story, but I still held the original draft. And we weren't done yet. The week between hearings felt like standing in the eye of a storm. Outside, everything looked calm: emails, meal preps, walks to the office, but inside my thoughts spun in relentless circles. I couldn't stop replaying David's face on the stand, the way he hesitated, cracked, then folded. For years, he had the truth, sat on it, protected their narrative while I carried the weight of silence. And still, part of me wanted to believe he didn't know better. But he did. So I stopped hoping he'd do the right thing. I started planning how I would. Julia and I met twice before the final hearing. She was surgical in her strategy, laying out every detail with mathematical precision. "We'll go on the offensive," she said, flipping open a slim binder labeled Miller v. Miller. "They're relying on verbal agreement and assumed financial obligation. We'll crush that." She showed me the timeline. 2015, full scholarship awarded. 2016, parents take out Parent Plus loans under their own names. 2017, 2019, David receives significant wire transfers from the same loan account. 2020, I complete undergrad debt-free. 2025, they sue me. "Let me guess," I said, "they used the loans, but not on me." She tapped a bank statement with a red pen. "Exactly. It went to David. We subpoenaed the records. They forgot digital footprints never lie." It was right there in black and white transfers from their federal loan account to David's private Duke account, textbook suppliers, and even rent to an apartment in Durham, North Carolina. They'd named the loans after me, but funded his life. I felt nausea crawl up my spine. That's fraud, right? Technically misrepresentation and misuse of educational funds, but civil court isn't about criminal charges, it's about proving intent and harm, and we're going to show both. I couldn't breathe for a second. I looked down at my hands, resting on the table. They didn't feel like mine anymore. That night, I sat alone in my apartment holding the ceramic bowl. It had become more than a key dish. It was a witness. Quiet, unmoving. It had seen me throw my first paycheck in joy, drop my tears after the lawsuit, receive Marcus's text about the Tumblr post. Now, I placed something new inside a manila envelope. Inside it was everything. My blog post, scholarship records, MIT's email confirming I turned down admission due to family decision, even Grandma's photo. She was the only one who had ever told me I was meant for more. I whispered to the bowl, like a prayer, "They won't take this from me." And I meant it. Court reconvened on a foggy Thursday. I wore the same blazer. Julia had on navy this time, calm and commanding. My parents looked identical to last time, polished, rehearsed. David was absent. Good. The judge took her seat. Her expression was unreadable, but something in the way she adjusted her glasses told me she remembered the last session well. "Ms. Mann," so she said, "you may begin." Julia stood. "Your Honor, we intend to demonstrate that this lawsuit is not only baseless but deliberately deceptive. The plaintiffs claim they took out loans for the defendant's education. In reality, those funds were used to finance their older son's out-of-state education." She handed over the evidence binder, one by one. The judge flipped. Timeline, bank records, financial aid confirmations. Then came the twist Julia had saved for last. "Your Honor," she said smoothly, "we also submit a 2016 audio recording from a family meeting the defendant secretly captured on his phone." Wait, what? I looked at Julia in shock. I hadn't given her a recording. She raised an eyebrow at me. Just a flicker. And then I remembered. My phone. That old iPhone 6 I'd buried in a box. Back in 2016, I had recorded one of the many family planning meetings where they explained why David's tuition was a joint sacrifice. I'd forgotten it existed. She must have found it in Discovery. The judge plugged in a pair of headphones. Listened. Her brows rose once, then again. My father's voice, tinny and clear. "We told Ethan we couldn't afford MIT. He believed it. That's all that matters." My mother, softer. "David deserved the chance. Ethan's strong, he'll bounce back." The judge removed the headphones like they'd burned her. She turned to the plaintiffs. "Would either of you care to explain?" My father blinked. My mother's mouth opened, then shut. Their attorney looked like he wanted to disappear. The judge didn't yell. She didn't lecture. Her voice remained even. "In light of this new information, the court finds the plaintiff's claims to be without merit and deeply misleading. The suit is dismissed with prejudice. Defendant may pursue reimbursement for legal fees if desired." Bang. Just like that. The gavel fell. I didn't cry, I didn't smile. I just breathed. For the first time in weeks, I inhaled fully, lungs expanded, chest lifted. I looked at Julia. She gave a small nod, then packed up her things with military efficiency. Outside, on the courthouse steps, I turned to her. "Why didn't you tell me about the recording?" I wanted to see your face when you won. She said, you deserved that moment. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a business card. If you ever need someone in your corner again, call me. And Ethan. Yeah. Some families break bones, others build bridges. You get to choose which one you keep. Then she walked away. I took the long way home. No music, just the hum of tires and the slow, strange realization. It was over. Or at least the legal part. Because back at home, there were still pieces to pick up, emotions to sort, truths to face. David had vanished. My parents had lost, but I still didn't feel whole. The day after the case was dismissed, I stayed in bed until noon. No alarms, no meetings, no court prep, just the slow return of silence this time without fear humming underneath it. When I finally got up, sunlight was slanting through the blinds. I padded barefoot to the kitchen. Still wearing the shirt from yesterday, I poured coffee into the same chipped mug I'd used since undergrad, one of the only things I'd taken when I moved out of my parents' house. The ceramic bowl still sat by the door. This time, it held nothing but my keys. It looked peaceful again. I should have felt victorious. But something in me still burned low, quiet, unresolved. Because none of it explained why my parents were so willing to lie, why David helped them, why now. Then, as if summoned by that thought, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, voicemail, 047. I didn't want to listen, but curiosity wins battles that exhaustion starts. I tapped play. Ethan, it's David. Listen, I know I don't deserve your time, but I need to explain, not for mom and dad, for me. Can you meet? He gave a coffee shop address in Capitol Hill, neutral ground. And then, I think you should know what really happened with the loans, and why they filed when they did. An hour later, I walked into a dim, half-empty cafe tucked between a florist and a bike repair shop. It smelled like burnt espresso and pine cleaner. I spotted David in the back, hunched over a cup he clearly wasn't drinking. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, he still had that athlete's build, but diminished. Like the scaffolding had fallen off the man. I sat down across from him. He didn't speak right away. Finally, I said, "You've got 5 minutes." David exhaled. I deserve that. He pulled a crumpled envelope from his jacket and slid it across the table. Inside were copies of emails, forwarded chains, one from my mom, one from their lawyer, and one from a federal loan account recovery service. Mom and Dad didn't sue you just to get money. He said they sued you because they were being audited. I blinked. Audited. Parent Plus loans, random compliance sweep. They got flagged because they listed you as the beneficiary, but the funds never hit your tuition accounts. The Department of Education asked for receipts, proof the money was used appropriately. My stomach dropped. David continued. They panicked. If the audit confirmed they misused the loans, they'd have to pay everything back immediately, plus penalties, possibly even face legal charges. So they sued me. I said cold. He nodded. To make it look like you were responsible, like you took the money and ran. I leaned back in my chair, mind spinning. That's why they made it so public. The emails, the lawyer, the letters, they wanted a trail. David winced. I didn't know at first, I swear. I thought it was just another family drama. Then I saw the paperwork. I told them it was wrong, but they said they had no choice. Of course they had a choice. I snapped, they always had a choice. They just never chose me. David looked down, his voice low. They used the loans to pay off my last year at Duke. I didn't ask them to. I told them I'd take out loans myself. But Mom said no. Said they couldn't have one son debt-free and the other buried. That was my scholarship. I said, my independence, and they turned it into a weapon. He nodded. I know, and I didn't speak up. I was scared and selfish. There it was. The sentence I'd waited a decade to hear. We sat in silence for a moment, the kind of silence that ages a person. Then David slid a check across the table, his name signed at the bottom, $50,000. What is this? I asked. It's everything I have saved since grad school. He said, I've been doing all right. I wanted to make it right. I know it's not enough. I stared at it. The amount didn't move me. The act did. This isn't about money, I said. It never was. I know, he said, but it's the only way I know how to say sorry. I didn't take the check, not then. Instead, I picked up my coffee, drained it in one long sip, and stood. You want to make it right, I said. He looked up. Tell them you knew. Write a statement, put it in writing, send it to Julia. I don't need your money. David, I need your spine. He nodded slowly. I will. I walked out without looking back. That night, I sat with the ceramic bowl in my lap. I ran my fingers over its rough edges, its uneven glaze. My grandmother once told me that in Japanese culture, broken bowls are repaired with gold kintsugi. The flaw becomes the beauty. I didn't feel beautiful, but I felt whole. Sort of. The next day, Julia called. You'll never guess what I got in the mail, she said. A confession. A certified letter from your parents' attorney. They're withdrawing all claims, formally apologizing, and promising not to pursue anything further. Looks like David grew a pair. I smiled. But then she added, there's more. They're also under investigation now. Turns out we weren't the only loan case they mishandled. My breath caught. This could get federal. She said, if you're willing, the Department of Education might want a statement from you. You could be part of something bigger. I didn't answer right away. I stared out the window, watched the city breathe. I never imagined my name would end up on a federal document, especially not as a witness. A week after Julia's call, I sat across from two agents from the Department of Education's Office of Inspector General. One was in her 50s, calm and firm. The other, a younger guy with sharp eyes and a notepad already half filled. They asked precise questions. Dates, signatures, transcripts, what I knew, what I had, what I remembered overhearing. I answered everything truthfully. And when they asked if I was willing to testify in a federal case against my parents, I said yes. Not out of anger, not even for justice, but because I had learned the hard way when people stay silent, liars thrive. And when liars thrive, people like me, kids from working-class families who work their asses off, get punished for believing in fairness. The fallout came fast. Within 2 months, the Department of Education officially opened an audit case into all Parent Plus loans taken out under my name and David's. Turns out, my parents weren't just unethical, they were serial manipulators. They had done this twice before, years earlier, using my cousin Jenna's name to co-sign a private student loan for David's summer abroad program. Jenna had dropped out of college over credit issues she never understood. Until now. The story made the rounds. Quietly at first, emails between legal departments, then local news picked it up, then a blog post from a Seattle education watchdog group. And then BuzzFeed. They ran the headline, Parents sued their son over tuition, turns out he was the one being scammed. The article didn't use my real last name, but people in my circles knew. My inbox exploded. Some messages were cruel, accusing me of humiliating my family. But most were from strangers, from people like me. I thought I was alone. Your story made me talk to my school counselor. My parents did something similar. I thought it was normal. It was sobering. And strangely healing. Meanwhile, Julia handled everything with her trademark quiet fire. She helped me file for financial damages related to the case. I wasn't looking for revenge, but legal fees, lost wages from missed work, and reputational harm were real. The court granted a modest but fair sum. Julia also recommended I get a therapist, something I'd been avoiding for years. Your trauma didn't start with the lawsuit, she said gently. That was just the final chapter. You deserve peace, not just justice. So I started therapy. And for the first time, I unpacked all of it. The years of feeling invisible, of being the utility son, the dependable one, the cheap one, the grief of losing not just trust, but a whole illusion of family. David and I spoke a few times after that. He followed through, submitted a signed statement, then another on behalf of Jenna when she was too overwhelmed to speak up. We didn't become close again. I didn't want to pretend nothing happened. But he showed up, and that mattered more than I expected. Then came the part I hadn't anticipated. One quiet Thursday morning, as I was packing for a long overdue road trip, I got a certified letter, no return address. I opened it slowly. Inside a typed page, and something wrapped in velvet. The letter was from my mother. Typed, unsigned. I don't expect forgiveness. I doubt I deserve it. I was raised to believe that love meant sacrifice, and I twisted that into control. I thought protecting David was fairness. I see now that I erased you in the process. I used to think you were cold, but now I understand you were surviving. You never owed us. We owe you. I hope, one day, you'll let go of this pain. You've earned your life. Ethan, go live it. I didn't cry. I just unwrapped the velvet. Inside was a gold chain. Not fancy, thin, light. At the center hung a tiny ceramic pendant glazed unevenly, the exact shade of blue as the bowl by my door. It was one of the broken pieces. I held it in my palm for a long time. Then I slipped it around my neck. A week later, I stood at the edge of Crater Lake, Oregon. No phone service, no lawsuits, no noise. Just the sound of water and wind. I sat on a flat rock and wrote something down in my journal. I don't forgive them yet, but I forgive myself. For not knowing sooner. For staying too long, for wishing it had been different. This is what freedom tastes like. No bitterness, just air. I closed the book and leaned back. And that's when my phone buzzed, emergency service restored for a moment. One message from Julia. They've agreed to a full settlement for Jenna too, and the department's expanding the case nationally. You started something. My breath caught. It's strange how something so heavy can leave so quietly. For years, the weight of it all expectation, guilt, betrayal lived in my bones. It shaped the way I stood, the way I spoke. I thought I'd never feel light again. But healing doesn't crash in like a storm. It arrives like mist. 2 months after the federal investigation expanded, Julia called with an update. They're drafting a policy memo, she said, sounding almost hopeful. New loan safeguards, stricter compliance. There's even talk of creating an alert system if parent loans aren't used directly for education. And all this because of my case. Well, she chuckled, your case and about 600 others that came forward afterward, but yours cracked the door open. I couldn't stop smiling, not because I wanted attention, but because it mattered. What happened to me didn't just end with a court ruling, it became a lever for change. And honestly, I think that's what I was searching for all along. Not revenge, not even closure. Just meaning. I moved out of Seattle that fall. It wasn't a dramatic departure, no box-packing montage or weepy airport goodbye, just me, a U-Haul, and a playlist full of songs I'd loved before the lawsuit hijacked my headspace. I settled in a smaller town near the coast, bought a secondhand bookshelf, started volunteering at a nonprofit that helps first-gen college students navigate financial aid. The first time I stood in front of a group of wide-eyed juniors, I told them, whatever number's on your FAFSA, it doesn't define you, and whoever tells you that you owe them your future, walk away. I became the mentor I never had. And slowly, that became enough. My parents never contacted me again. Not after the settlement, not after the article, not even after Jenna filed her own civil complaint. But one day, a Christmas card arrived. No return address, just my name. Inside was a photo, grainy, old, clearly scanned. It was me at 10 years old, sitting next to my grandmother on her porch. She had her arm around me, and we were laughing. Taped to the back was a post-it note. She always believed in you. No signature. I stared at it for a long time. Maybe it was my mother, maybe David, maybe no one. It didn't matter. I framed it and hung it near my desk. The ceramic bowl came with me too. It sits by my front door in my new place, just like always, still chipped, still real. I've come to think of it like a metaphor for myself, damaged, yes, but not disposable. It's what holds what matters, keys, notes, small things I'd hate to lose. It's imperfect, but it's mine. Every now and then, someone from my past reaches out, an old classmate, a cousin, even Marcus, who found the Tumblr post. You ever think about writing it all down, he texted once? Not just the case, but everything. I thought about it. And then I did. Not a tell-all, not a courtroom memoir, just a quiet book about surviving family betrayal, finding your voice, and realizing that sometimes justice looks like walking away. It's called The Bowl by the Door. And if you ever read it, know this. It isn't about revenge. It's about reclamation of truth, of self, of silence broken. So, what do I want you to take from all this? That blood doesn't automatically mean loyalty. That sometimes. Walking away is braver than staying, and that you deserve peace not someday, but now. If you've ever been the forgotten one, the lesser sibling, the one told to shrink for someone else to shine, know that I see you. You're not invisible. You never were. And finally, if you're still here, watching till the end, leave a comment, share your story, tag someone who needs to hear this, and hit that subscribe button because around here, we believe in telling the stories no one else dares to. Because when the world tries to silence you, sometimes the loudest thing you can do is just keep telling the truth. Thank you for listening, because the truth didn't just set me free, it built the life I deserved. Story 2. I'm Nathan Carter. I'm 30 years old, a software engineer in Seattle, and until 3 months ago, I thought I was the kind of son any parent would be proud of. I paid off my family's debts. I helped my little brother go to grad school in Paris. I loaned my sister startup money because her business coach said it was better to borrow from family than from a bank. And on a random Thursday, after working late on a product deadline and dreaming of the weekend, I came home to find an empty house, no lights, no dinner, no sound, just a single envelope on the kitchen counter with my name written in my mother's handwriting. Inside it was a note and a printed transaction receipt from our joint savings account, my savings account. It read, "Dear Nathan, we've decided to finally take that Florida trip your dad's always dreamed of. Don't worry, we only used a small portion of the savings. You're doing so well. Honey, you'll bounce back in no time. Love always. Mom and Dad." They took $53,740 as 16, everything I'd saved over 7 years. And they didn't even bother to lie properly. They called it borrowing, but they didn't even leave a return date. That night, as I stood in the dark kitchen holding that note, something inside me cracked. But before I tell you what I did, what I took back and what I burned to the ground along the way, let me know where you're watching from. If you've ever had to set boundaries with people who claim to love you, hit that like button. And if you've been through betrayal masked as family loyalty, subscribe. You're not alone anymore. Because this is not just a story about revenge, it's about finally waking up. Let me take you back. For most people, childhood memories are a mix of ice cream trucks, summer sprinklers, birthday parties. For me, they're mostly quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, the kind you get when your parents forget you at soccer practice, and the coach's wife ends up driving you home again. The kind where the house is filled with tension so thick you flinch when a cabinet slams shut. The kind of quiet where you learn to apologize for your own presence. We lived in Spokane, Washington, back then. Dad was a warehouse supervisor, tough job, long hours. Mom stayed home, but she always looked tired, not in a nurturing way, more like resentful. When I got accepted into the robotics camp at age 14, I was over the moon. I ran into the kitchen waving the acceptance letter. Dad barely looked up from his paper. "Camp, who's paying for that? Not us." I remember my mom's voice, soft but final. "Your sister wants to try ballet again. She deserves that chance." Emily, 3 years younger than me, got the new point shoes and recital dress. I got a lawn mowing gig and a chipped iPad from Craigslist. Back then, I thought it was just bad timing. That one day, they'd make it up to me. When I got into MIT on scholarship, my heart nearly exploded. I'd finally earned it. I came home with the acceptance letter, expecting maybe, just maybe, a celebratory dinner. Instead, I got a closed door and a guilt trip. "Your dad got laid off." Mom whispered, "He's humiliated. Can't you defer? Just for a year? Help us get back on our feet." I took 2 jobs. I deferred MIT, and I never went back. Fast forward to age 23, I'd moved to Seattle, working my way up in a scrappy fintech startup. I was making decent money by then, living in a shared apartment, eating dollar tacos, sending half my paycheck home. It felt like what a good son should do. Jeremy, my younger brother, got into a master's program in Paris. Mom called it our big family moment. "We're so proud. Nate, couldn't have done it without you." No joke there. They took out a loan in my name, co-signed without telling me. I found out when I applied for a car loan and got denied. Dad's response: "We had no choice. You've always been the reliable one." That word haunted me. Reliable. It doesn't mean valued, it means disposable. 3 months ago, I got a text from my sister. Family dinner this weekend at Aunt Linda's. Be there by 5. Don't be late this time. I took a train, bought flowers, brought a bottle of wine. When I showed up, the house was empty. No cars, no music, no smell of food. I knocked, rang, texted, waited. An hour later, I checked Instagram. Jeremy had posted a story cheersing champagne with everyone at a fancy restaurant. No one had forgotten. They just moved the dinner and didn't tell me. I stood outside Aunt Linda's for 10 more minutes, then walked away. When I got home, the house was eerily quiet. At first, I thought maybe my parents were asleep, but their room was empty. So was Emily's. The kitchen light was off, the fridge was nearly empty, and there it was, the envelope. The note, the transaction printout, the hollow, gut-punching realization they had left me, again. This time, not at soccer practice, not at some dinner. They had taken my future and vanished. I sat down on the floor, the paper trembling in my hand. I reread the note 4 times. And then I opened my banking app. Account balance, $67.48. That was the moment I remembered something from college. A quote from a psychology professor. The most dangerous person isn't the one who lashes out in anger. It's the one who's been silent for too long and finally stops playing along. My phone buzzed, an email from my bank, a security notification. My parents had tried to change the contact number for the joint account. And that's when something inside me clicked. I wasn't going to call them. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to get it all back. Every penny, every apology, every ounce of dignity, but not the way they expected. No yelling, no tears. Just precision, cold, legal, ruthless. Because sometimes justice doesn't wear a badge. Sometimes it wears a quiet smile. And that was the night I opened a folder I hadn't touched in years, one labeled MIT, deferred. Inside was a photocopy of my scholarship contract, and something I never thought I'd use. A clause that changed everything. I opened that folder for the first time in 7 years. It smelled like dust, paper, and that odd, bitter trace of memory, like the box of old sweaters you find after winter has passed. Inside was everything I had refused to throw away. The MIT scholarship letter, printed and underlined, the acceptance email, from a now-defunct college address, notes I had written to myself, dreams, goals, even doodles of the Boston skyline, and at the very bottom, a letter my old guidance counselor made me keep, just in case. It was a copy of a financial agreement clause attached to my scholarship deferral, something no one, not even my parents, knew existed. It stated that if the student was forced to defer due to financial hardship created by a dependent family, and that student later provided sustained financial support to said family, the university would reconsider aid packages retroactively with documented proof. I stared at it like I'd found a cheat code buried in a forgotten video game cartridge. Because suddenly, I saw something I hadn't seen in years: leverage. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my tiny kitchen table, coffee going cold, fingers stiff from opening old emails, sorting receipts, highlighting transactions. I downloaded my bank statements from the last 6 years. I color-coded every expense related to my family. Rent I paid when Dad was between jobs, grocery runs to cover Emily's food during her early startup phase, tuition transfers for Jeremy's overseas semester. Even the $2,000 I Venmo'd Mom when she said the fridge was broken. It added up to more than $89,000. I stared at the spreadsheet, my chest felt tight. I had literally built their lives while putting mine on hold. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I renamed the file. Repayment. Let me take you back to where it really started. Not the money, not the scholarship. The real betrayal was quieter, smaller, almost invisible. I was 17, a senior in high school. There was a poetry contest. Silly, I know, but my English teacher had submitted one of my pieces without telling me. It won a statewide youth award. There was going to be a banquet. I told my parents over dinner. I even wore a tie. Dad didn't look up. Mom said, "That's nice, but we can't all take time off to chase dreams. Nathan, some of us have real responsibilities." And that was it. No clap on the back, no "we're proud of you." I ended up going alone. My name was called. No one clapped because no one knew me. I took the certificate, smiled at the empty room, and threw it in the trash can on my way out. That certificate became a symbol for me, not of failure, but of invisibility. So yes, when people ask me why I kept helping them, why I let them borrow money, take my time, guilt me into changing plans, the answer is simple: because I thought maybe one day they'd finally see me. Not as their wallet, not as their fallback plan, just as their son. But here's the thing about being invisible. Once you realize you were never truly seen, you can become anything, including a threat. The day after I found the clause, I booked an appointment with a financial advisor, a woman named Janice, mid-40s, fierce red blazer, a voice that didn't tolerate bullshit. I told her my situation. She didn't blink. "You're not alone. You know, a lot of high achievers from dysfunctional families end up like this, rescuers, until they burn out." I showed her the clause, the spreadsheet. She leaned back, eyes sharp. "Do you want justice or just closure?" I swallowed. "I want both." "Good," she said, "because we can prove financial abuse. If they took money from a joint account with no written consent, that's theft in civil court." She gave me a checklist: freeze access to shared accounts, submit retroactive tax returns to document misused funds, draft cease and desist letters for co-signed loans, collect all communication regarding money. Suddenly, this wasn't just therapy with Excel, this was a case. There was one more thing I had to do. I went to my old childhood home the following weekend. They weren't back from Florida yet. The neighbor confirmed it, said, "They're probably still enjoying cocktails by the beach." I had the spare key. I hadn't used it in years, but the lock still clicked the same way. The house smelled unfamiliar, too clean, too empty. I walked to my old bedroom. The walls were bare, but the closet still had a dusty box labeled "Nathan, do not throw." Inside were old report cards, the chipped iPad, some childhood drawings, and at the very bottom a small wooden jewelry box with a broken lock. Inside it was something I hadn't seen in over a decade. My MIT acceptance letter, folded, worn at the creases, and taped to the back, a sticky note from my dad. "You'll go someday? We're just not ready for you to leave yet." I stood there, letter in hand, throat tight, not ready for me to leave. They never let me begin. I took the box. I didn't steal. I didn't destroy. But I took what was mine. When I got back home, I placed the jewelry box on my desk. It would become my reminder that I had dreams, and they weren't dead, just delayed. That night, I initiated the first account freeze. Mom called at 10:12 p.m. "Nathan, something's wrong with the bank. We can't access the Florida rental deposit. Did you touch something?" I let it ring. She called again and again. Voicemail after voicemail. Until finally, at 11:06 p.m., she texted, "Nathan, please, your dad is freaking out. You can't do this. We're family." I texted back 3 words. "You first weren't." The next morning, I walked into my boss's office and requested 2 weeks off. She raised an eyebrow. "Everything okay?" I nodded. I'm just settling something old." Because the next step wasn't just financial, it was legal. 2 days after freezing the joint account, I filed a formal fraud notice with my bank. It wasn't easy. The representative, Paul, maybe mid-30s, curly hair, efficient, asked the question I'd been dreading. "Can you confirm the account holder identities and relationship to the suspected party?" I exhaled. My voice cracked, but I answered, "They're my parents." He didn't flinch, just nodded, typed something, and handed me a disclosure form. "You're not the first, and unfortunately, probably not the last." The next week was a blur of legal documents, notarized statements, credit freezes, and a surprisingly supportive call from MIT's finance office. Turns out, they still had my deferral file on record. The same woman who processed it in 2015, Carol, warm voice, sharper than she sounded, recognized my name. "I always wondered what happened to you," she said. "You were one of our strongest candidates that year." I told her the truth, not the whole saga, but enough. She paused, then asked gently, "Are you okay now?" I lied. "Getting there." She promised to help review my case for possible back credit of aid. It wasn't a full reversal, but it was something. For the first time in years, I felt Seen. Then came the group text. It was from my sister, Emily, a photo of the family, standing on a beach in matching white and khaki. Caption, family forever, Florida. Son, blessed. They had the nerve to post that. The same week they drained my account, skipped town, and ghosted my birthday. Yes, did I forget to mention they stole my money on my 30th birthday? I stared at the photo for a full minute. Then I screen captured it, printed it, folded it, and taped it to the outside of the wooden jewelry box from home. A new symbol, not of hurt, but of proof. The following Friday, I attended a small dinner party thrown by a friend from work, Marcus. We'd grown closer lately. He was sharp, hilarious, and had this ability to cut through BS like a laser. When I told him the basics of what happened, he didn't react with pity. He just leaned back and said, "You know what this is, right? A family meltdown." No, it's theft, emotional blackmail, and intergenerational trauma wrapped in passive-aggressive niceties. I blinked. You sound like my therapist. Nah, just a guy with boundary issues and divorced parents. He offered something I hadn't expected. His cousin was an estate lawyer. You'd be surprised how many of these cases don't go criminal, but the civil stuff, that's where people get hit hard, especially if there are paper trails. With Marcus's help, I booked a free consultation. That lawyer, Teresa, was calm, composed, late 40s with that no-nonsense courtroom energy. She reviewed my files, bank records, Venmo logs, messages, even voice memos I'd kept out of habit. Her verdict: "Oh, you have a solid claim, especially if you never gave express consent for the large withdrawal." What's the worst that could happen to them, I asked. Civil judgment, garnished wages, seizure of joint property if the funds can't be returned. I nodded slowly. It felt terrifying and thrilling. Do you want to proceed? I didn't hesitate. Yes. 3 days later, Emily called. I didn't answer at first, but something told me to pick up the second time. Her voice was chipper, fake, the kind of sugary tone people use when they want something. "Hey, big bro, we're thinking of throwing a small get-together when we get back. Thought you'd want to come. Maybe bring some of that fancy wine you always have." I laughed, out loud. "You mean the wine I bought with the salary you borrowed 6 months of without interest?" There was silence. Then, "Nathan, don't be like that. We're family. And honestly, you've always been the strong one, the one we could count on." There it was again. The reliable one. I almost thanked her for reminding me. "I won't be attending," I said, "but don't worry, you'll be getting a letter soon." A letter. From my attorney. Click. That weekend, I finally went on a date. Not a big one. Just coffee with someone Marcus had introduced me to, a quiet, sweet guy named Daniel who worked in urban planning and had the kind of laugh that made people stop to smile. I didn't dump my trauma on him, but I did tell him something real. I'm learning how to stop setting myself on fire to keep other people warm. He looked at me for a long time and said, "That's not healing, that's finally starting." On Monday morning, I got a call from my dad. First time in months. I let it go to voicemail, heart thudding. He didn't yell, didn't threaten. He pleaded, "Son, we made a mistake. I made a mistake. Your mom said it was just temporary. You've always been the rock. Nate, we assumed." He trailed off. Then, "You can't take this to court. Think about your mother's health. Think about the family name." I didn't respond, not right away. But I saved the voicemail. Evidence. Because behind every guilt trip is a confession. A few days later, Emily posted a cryptic status on Facebook. "When people show their true colors, believe them the first time, disappointed but not surprised." Someone commented, "Are you okay?" She replied, "Fake people everywhere, especially those closest to us." I didn't engage. But Marcus texted me, "Wow, gaslight much." "Front row seats," I replied. "Grab popcorn." Then came the certified letter. Served to their mailbox the morning they flew back. Within 48 hours, I got my first furious text from my mom. "How dare you make us look like criminals? We're your parents." I responded, "And I'm your son, not your savings account." She replied with one final message. "You've changed." I stared at those words for a long time, then typed back, "No, I just finally stopped lying about who you are." 3 days later, their lawyer contacted mine. They wanted to settle, but I had one condition, and it wasn't about the money. When their lawyer called to discuss settlement, I was in the middle of watering my plants. It was oddly satisfying, hearing someone who probably wore $400 shoes say your client with forced politeness, like I was some foreign country he'd underestimated. They're open to negotiation. As long as this doesn't escalate publicly, our understanding is, your client is seeking a reimbursement of approximately $53,000. Teresa, my attorney, leaned into the speakerphone and smiled audibly. Actually, that's just the liquid sum. We'll also be presenting evidence of long-term financial abuse, co-sign loans without consent, and emotional damages which, as you know, can be very persuasive in civil court. There was a pause, a sigh, then the lawyer offered a lump sum, lowball, obviously. I shook my head. "We're not doing this for money," I whispered to Teresa. She nodded, and then she said something that made the air in my apartment go still. "My client is willing to settle under one condition. A beat. They must sign a formal statement admitting what they did, that they used him, deceived him, and exploited his trust. It must be notarized and shared with his extended family." The other line went silent. Teresa clicked her pen and smiled at me. "We'll wait. You see, this wasn't about cash anymore. That would have been too easy. They treated me like a machine, a faucet they could turn on and off. I wanted them to feel the discomfort of truth, not rage, not vengeance. Accountability, the kind that makes you sit in your own choices. I didn't want them in jail. I wanted them to look our aunts and uncles in the eye at Thanksgiving and say, yes, we took everything from our son, and we called it love. Marcus called me that night, sensing something had shifted. "You sound calmer," he said, like scary calm. "You ever watch a dam crack?" I asked. "You don't hear a bang. You hear silence. And then everything floods." He didn't respond for a moment. "You're gonna win this, aren't you?" "That's not the point." "Then what is?" "I want them to never lie about me again." A week passed. Then came the email from their lawyer. Subject line, "Re-family matter settlement, confirmation." I opened it slowly, hands cold. They'd agreed. Attached was a draft of the statement. It read, in part, "We, Laura and Daniel Carter, acknowledge that we made financial decisions without our son Nathan's consent. These choices, while misguided, caused real harm. We apologize and take full responsibility." It wasn't poetic, but it was real. It had names, actions, admission. They'd also agreed to wire a partial reimbursement, $37,000. Not the full amount, but enough. I didn't even blink at the number, because the real debt wasn't financial. It was emotional. That Friday, I did something I hadn't done since college. I packed a suitcase. But not for vacation. I booked a 2-day trip to Boston. To walk the MIT campus alone. Not to apply again, not even to dream, just to reclaim the part of me I left buried under guilt and sacrifice. The moment I stepped onto Killian Court, I felt dizzy. Like my younger self was walking beside me, eyes wide, hopeful. I sat by the dome, pulled out the old wooden jewelry box I'd carried in my backpack, and opened it. Inside was the folded MIT letter and the Florida beach photo, 2 pieces of the same puzzle, who I could have been, who I became. I took out the photo, tore it once, then again, until it was just fragments in my hand. A security guard passed by. He looked at me, nodded once. I nodded back. I didn't cry, but I did smile. That night, I wrote an email to my extended family. Just facts. Attached the signed statement, said I would no longer attend family holidays. That I wished them well, but I would no longer play the role they had assigned me. The banker, the babysitter, the golden boy with no needs. I ended it simply, "I'm no longer performing the version of me you invented. I hope the real one finds peace." Then I clicked send. A few days later, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten, no return address, but the writing was unmistakable. My dad's. I opened it cautiously. Inside were just 6 words, scrawled in blue pen. "You were never supposed to leave." I read it 3 times. Then I folded it and set it on fire. Watch the edges curl, the blue ink turn black, the last guilt trip go up in smoke. 2 weeks after that, I met with my financial advisor again. Janice looked over the wire receipt, the legal docs, and my updated savings plan. "You've made a full recovery," she said. I looked at her, steady. "Not yet, but I'm no longer bleeding." She smiled. "That's more than most." Before I left, she handed me something. A plain envelope, marked internal use only. Inside was a brochure for a fund that supported first-generation college students who deferred due to family obligations. She'd added a sticky note. "If you're ever ready to give back on your terms." I tucked it into my bag. Maybe someday. Emily texted me a week later. "Heard you went public. Nice work. Mom's been crying every day. Hope you're proud." I didn't respond. Because if she still thought silence was weakness, she hadn't learned anything. 2 days later, I received an email from Jeremy. Subject I didn't know. I clicked it open, and what I read changed everything I thought I knew about what really happened with the money. The subject line blinked at me. I didn't know. It was from Jeremy, the brother I had funded through grad school in Paris, the one I hadn't spoken to since this all blew up. I stared at the email for almost an hour, fingers hovering, chest tight, jaw clenched. Then I clicked. The message was longer than I expected, maybe 5 paragraphs. But it only took a few lines to shake me. "Nathan, I swear I didn't know about the withdrawal from your account. Mom told me they were using the Florida inheritance from Aunt May. She said you had given your blessing, said you didn't need the money right now. I'm sorry, I should have asked. I should have known, but I trusted them." Florida inheritance. There was no Florida inheritance. Aunt May passed away broke, with more medical debt than property. I knew this. Dad told me himself 5 years ago. And that's when it hit me. They'd used me as a cover story. They told everyone, Jeremy, extended family, maybe even friends, that I had funded their trip, that I had been generous. They wore my bank balance like a badge of honor without ever asking me. "I feel so stupid," Jeremy's message continued. "I thought we were finally doing better. I thought maybe Mom and Dad had changed. I didn't know they were still using you, still lying. If you ever want to talk, I'm here." I didn't respond immediately, not because I didn't believe him, but because I didn't know how to feel. Relieved, betrayed again, sad that he'd been manipulated too, angry that he hadn't asked. All of it, at once. That night, I dug through the saved voicemails. There it was, Mom's voice from months earlier. "Jeremy got into grad school. We want to surprise him with a family trip. You know, one last thing before he disappears into Europe. We thought of using part of the money in savings, just for something nice." That soft tone. The one she always used when she wanted something. Wrapped in, "It's just a little, and we're doing it for him." And I had stayed silent. The next morning, I met Marcus for breakfast at our usual diner. Waffles, eggs, orange juice, the kind of breakfast that forces you to sit still for a second. I showed him the email. He read it carefully, then said, "They played him too." "Yeah. That's a special kind of toxic," he added, "using one kid to screw over the other, then telling both it was for love." I didn't respond. Instead, I looked out the window. A mom and daughter were walking past laughing, holding hands, chasing pigeons. The girl couldn't have been more than 5, and she trusted her mom completely. I wondered when I had stopped trusting mine, and if that little girl would reach the same point I had someday. After breakfast, I walked home and opened my repayment file again. I added a new column, emotional cost. I didn't fill it with numbers, I filled it with moments. The missed poetry banquet, the empty chair on college decision day, the voicemail on my 30th birthday, the time Emily borrowed $500 for car repairs and posted a Sephora haul that afternoon. Then I opened a blank document. Title, my terms. I typed, "This is what you owe me," not in money, in truth. Then I listed everything I had done for them, one act at a time. Not to shame. To make it real. To no longer carry it silently. 2 days later, I got a Venmo notification. $200 from Jeremy. Caption, "For the time you bailed me out when my credit card failed in Paris, I never said thank you." Another notification, $50. For the guitar you bought me in 10th grade, I didn't deserve it. One by one, he started paying me back, not because I asked, but because he finally saw it. He finally saw me. The next move was mine. And I knew exactly what to do. I booked a table for 4 at a quiet cafe. Neutral ground, public, controlled. I invited Jeremy, Emily, and yes, my parents. I told them it was their one shot to speak their truth. No yelling, no theatrics, just facts. Emily declined. She texted, "You've turned into a stranger. I don't sit with strangers." My mom replied with silence. But Jeremy came, and so did my dad. They arrived late. Of course, my father looked older, slower. The Florida tan had faded. The weight of embarrassment clung to his posture. Jeremy looked nervous, but open. We ordered coffee. I pulled out the notarized statement, slid it across the table. Dad didn't touch it. "So this is it?" he asked. "Your big punishment?" "No," I replied. "This is closure. You wanted to be forgiven without doing the work. That's not how this works anymore. We're your family. Family doesn't erase history. It makes amends for it." There was a silence so heavy it felt like winter in my chest. Jeremy cleared his throat. "Dad, I believed you. I defended you. I used his money thinking it was a gift, but it was a lie, and you let me carry that." My dad looked down, hands trembling. I didn't know how to stop. He whispered, "We needed help. And Nathan, you always made it look easy." That sentence hit like glass breaking inside me. "You mistook my silence for permission," I said. He nodded. And for the first time, he cried, not performatively, not guilt-tripping. Just cried. Jeremy reached across the table and placed his hand on mine. "I see it now, man, and I'm sorry, I should have seen it sooner." As they left, Jeremy turned and said, "If you ever want a real brother again, I'll be here, no guilt, no strings." I nodded. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no. That night, I walked into my apartment, turned on the lamp, opened the wooden box, placed the statement inside, folded. I closed the lid, clicked the latch shut, and then I whispered to the silence, "That's how the story ends for you." But as it turns out, the story wasn't over. Because one final secret still waited to be uncovered, one that none of us saw coming. It started with a knock. Not a loud one, not the kind that says I'm angry or I'm here to collect. No, this was a soft, hesitant knock. I opened the door and found Emily, standing in my hallway, arms crossed, eyes puffy, no makeup, no curated Instagram smile. She looked real. I hadn't seen her like that since we were kids. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. She didn't sit. She paced, like a caged animal. "I'm not here to fight," she said. "Okay. I'm not here to apologize either." "Okay." She finally stopped pacing, faced me. "But I need to tell you something, because it's time someone did." She pulled out her phone and opened her notes app. "You remember when Dad lost his job that year after the accident?" "Yeah, I remember covering their rent for 4 months." She nodded. "You weren't the only one helping." That made me blink. "What do you mean?" She hesitated. "I gave them money too, a lot more than I ever told you." She looked down, biting her lip. "I sold my car, cashed out my Roth IRA, maxed 2 credit cards." I frowned. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" "Because they made me promise not to. Said they didn't want you to feel bad. Said you were fragile. That if you knew how much we were all doing, you might spiral." That word again. Fragile. Funny how people use it to control you, masking cruelty as concern. "Why now?" I asked. She exhaled. "Because I thought you were the golden child, the one they actually believed in, and I resented you for it. But then I saw the statement you made them sign, saw the truth laid out line by line, and I realized." She trailed off. I waited. "They didn't protect you, they used you, just like they used me." I didn't know what to say. So I didn't. She walked to the shelf where the wooden jewelry box sat. She touched the lid gently. "That was in your room growing up, right?" "Yeah." "I remember it. You used to keep notes in it, your dreams." "Still do," I said softly. She nodded. Then without looking at me, she added, There's something else. Something I didn't want to admit, the Florida trip. My stomach turned. What about it? It wasn't their idea, it was mine. Silence. Like every noise in the room had just stepped outside. You what I asked? She swallowed hard. I wanted to celebrate Jeremy's graduation. I thought, if we all went together, maybe we could fix something. And I knew Mom would say no unless there was money. So I asked Dad if he could move some things around. You told him to use my account? No, I told him to use the family funds. I thought he had some tucked away. He said not to worry, that he'd take care of it. I didn't ask questions. I shook my head. Emily, that was my tuition money. I know, she whispered. I know now. She looked up at me, eyes glassy. But I never meant to steal from you. She sat down then. For the first time, pulled her knees to her chest like she used to do in our treehouse. We were just kids trying to survive adults who never gave us safety, she murmured, and then we grew up and became their tools. That sentence landed hard. Because it wasn't wrong. I asked her the one thing that had haunted me. Why didn't you ever defend me? She looked me in the eyes, voice trembling. Because if I admitted they were hurting you, I'd have to admit they hurt me too. And I wasn't ready for that. I made us tea, we sat in silence. The kind of silence that comes not from awkwardness, but from mutual grief. She didn't ask to be forgiven. And I didn't offer it. But something settled between us. Not closure. Alignment. A few days later, I received a package in the mail. No return address. But inside was something unmistakable. A first edition copy of the poetry anthology I'd won that high school award for. The one I threw away after no one showed up to the banquet. Tucked inside was a note. It showed up in a box Mom never opened. I figured it was yours, E. I held the book in my hands. Ran my fingers over the embossed title. Felt the texture of the paper. It wasn't worth much money. But to me, it felt like a tiny piece of my childhood finally finding its way home. I brought the book to therapy that week. Dr. Wells asked how I felt holding it. Heavier than I expected, I said. She smiled. Sometimes healing weighs more than trauma. That weekend, I hosted a small dinner. Just Jeremy, Marcus, and Emily. Simple food, laughter, no subtext, no emotional blackmail. Just people trying. We didn't toast to healing, that would have been too cliché. But we did toast to honesty. And for the first time in decades, it didn't taste bitter. I still get texts from Mom sometimes. Passive-aggressive Bible quotes, articles about forgiveness and family unity, links to GoFundMe pages she thinks I'll contribute to. I don't block her. But I don't reply. Some ghosts don't deserve exorcism, they just deserve distance. A month later, I walked past the admissions building at MIT, just passing through, like a ghost of the boy I used to be. And then I saw a sign. Returning Adult Learners Info Session, today at 2 p.m. And for the first time in years, I walked in. The classroom smelled like dry erase markers and fresh paint. 12 folding chairs, a whiteboard that still had the factory sticker clinging to its corner, and a facilitator with a voice so warm, it melted every excuse off my chest. If you're here, she said, you've already done the hardest part. You came back. I sat in the back, quiet, observing. A man in his 50s with a Teamsters hoodie shared that he left college in 1989 after his wife got pregnant. A woman in her 40s, freshly divorced, said she was finally learning the things she gave up to support someone else's dream. A single mom spoke up, eyes teary, about taking night classes after her son asked her why she never wore a graduation cap. And me, when it was my turn, I hesitated. I was accepted here, I said softly, once, but I gave up the seat for family. The room didn't pity me. They nodded, quietly, because they knew that story. Maybe not my exact version, but the shape of it. The surrender, the sacrifice, the silence. I didn't reapply to MIT that day. That would have been too cinematic. But I did take a catalog of their continuing ed programs. I ran my fingers across one class titled Narratives of Resilience Writing Through Trauma. Something stirred. Not ambition. Not revenge. Just readiness. Later that night, I walked home and sat with the wooden box one last time. I opened it slowly, like a ritual. Inside were three things now. The first letter from MIT, the poetry book from Emily, the notarized statement from my parents. I looked at each one like a page in a story I had outgrown. Then I closed the box for the last time. This time, I didn't click the latch shut. I just left it open. Let the story breathe. Months passed. Jeremy got a job teaching English in France. Emily started therapy, even texted me one of her journal pages. Marcus moved in with his boyfriend and we all helped him paint the new apartment, arguing over which shade of beige looked least depressing. And me, I started writing again. Tiny stories at first, just little moments, memories, lessons. The kind you don't even know are inside you until they spill out at 2 a.m. Then, one day, I submitted one to a digital zine for adult learners. It got accepted. They paid me $50 and sent a coffee mug. I've never been prouder of anything. A few months later, I was invited to speak at a local library panel. Theme healing, when the apology never comes. I wore a blazer I hadn't touched since my last family wedding. Tucked my speech notes into a folder, wrote my own introduction. I'm not here as a victim. I said that night, I'm here as a survivor, not of war or fire or disease, but of something quieter, the kind of betrayal that comes wrapped in a hug, the kind that calls itself love. People cried, people clapped, people waited after to hug me, and one woman, gray hair, trembling hands whispered, I lost my son to silence, but maybe tonight, I found the words to get him back. The next day, I walked past my parents' house. Not on purpose. It was on my jogging route, but something told me to stop. There it was, same siding, same porch, same overgrown rosebush. No one was home. I stood at the edge of the lawn, staring at the swing set Jeremy and I used to play on. And then I noticed something. The wind chime on the porch. Still there. Still rusted. Still broken. A part of me wanted to fix it. Another part whispered, let it stay broken. Because not everything deserves repair. Some things just need to stay still so we can move. In the months that followed, my family stayed distant. Some called it cold. Others called it healthy boundaries. I called it freedom. I began setting alarms again, but not for other people's emergencies, for me. Writing hour, walk break, therapy check-in, little reminders that my time was mine again. One day, I got a message from Teresa, my lawyer. Subject: you inspired a clause. She had added a new recommendation to her estate planning clients, a family transparency addendum, where heirs could opt out of certain roles or insist on disclosures. She said my case helped shape it. I laughed. From scapegoat to policy change, I replied, not bad for a kid who never finished undergrad. So here's what I've learned. Sometimes the people who hurt you don't wear masks. They wear matching Christmas sweaters. They call it tradition. They call it love. But love isn't supposed to cost your dignity. Love doesn't make you shrink. Love expands you. If you're watching this, and you've been the family ATM, or the reliable one, or the fixer who never gets fixed, you're not alone. And you're not broken. You were conditioned to believe your worth was transactional, that your usefulness was love. But I promise you, love isn't earned by sacrifice. It's revealed by how people treat you when you say no. So I leave you with this. If they wouldn't clap for your dreams, if they never showed up to your victories, if they only call when they need something, you can love them from a distance. You can break the cycle. You can start again. Even if it takes 30 years. Even if the only person cheering is you. Because healing doesn't always end in reconciliation. Sometimes, it ends in you coming home to yourself.